Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a few minutes of fun. I thought I would have a little play in the Dina Wakley ledger journal today. I really haven't got very far. Some watercolour flowers with a little thing, and then yes, there have been deadlines and work, and while I'm deeply grateful for all that, I'd love to just have another little play, really. So we might not go all the way today. We might just do some preparatory stages, gathering some things. You can see I've got leftover scraps sitting around here. The very first thing I'm going to do is put my mat in place, so that we've got a little bit of waterproof coverage, although the ledger is bigger than the mat, but the mat gives me a space to mix paint or do stuff like that, so that's a good thing to have. What I was actually going to say is the first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of gesso on this. That's partly because I want to knock back the colour of the page a little bit, but it will also just give me a really good surface for applying wet media. You could do this with clear gesso if you're a big fan of the colour already. For me, it's quite in your face and I love it, but I want it subtler. And as you can see at the moment, I'm doing this in a very loose way. I just dipped in the water there to get a little bit more movement in that gesso, and also because I want it quite translucent. I want to be able to see what's going on underneath, just not quite as much as I can at the moment. So just spreading out that gesso. This is golden, but any gesso will do, acrylic gesso or white acrylic paint will get the job done as well. If you do it in quite a watery fluid mix, you'll get this lovely see-through effect. So I'm really happy that there are patches where it's quite heavy, patches where it isn't. So again, just dipping the brush in a bit of water so that I can spread that out. I mean, this paper will take mediums anyway, but if I want to get a bit heavy duty with it, it's just, as I say, gesso. That's what gesso is for, preparing a surface for use. So there we go. That's kind of as much as that is. You see, I put the craft mat out and then I just painted on my floor surface. But that will all come up, particularly if I address it while it's still wet, but with a bit of elbow grease, I'll also be able to get rid of it later. So there we go. Simple first coat. And it's just given me a nice rough mixed media look already. Just that kind of randomness of those brush strokes, slightly patchy gesso, gives me variation across the page in a way that makes me pretty happy. There we go. So I've got some scraps that got cut when I was trimming some decorated card. I think it's a long time ago now. It may even have been as part of Photo School 3, so it's over a year and a half ago probably, and they've been sitting by the guillotine ever since. So those are sort of in my head as being something nice to use as an architectural element to just build structure, maybe something like that. I've got some of the side effect handmade tape. So we did some stenciling with watercolors and that was left over. I did some meadow postcard quartet things and that was left over. I'll link to those two videos if you want to see that tape being made, but that also seems to me like quite a good thing. Quite like some ripped edges here because this is all a bit formal and a bit square at the moment. So I want a bit less perfection going on there. I think that one will rip in a straight line. And then I've pulled out some, let's see, quite like that. That's rather nice. And then as a balancing act over the other side, something smaller, but using those same strips, maybe. That doesn't want to do that. Where's my dark blue one? There's my dark blue one. I only took a bit off the dark blue one, so I've only got a bit to play with. But that's maybe quite nice. Little balancing scraps up there. Or I might leave that whole space open up there. I was in the middle of saying I was running through some of my shelves and came across the Found Relatives packs. These I think have been discontinued, but you might well still find them around in independent craft stockists around the place. Idea-ology, Found Relatives, and one of my favourite Tim Holtz photos, vintage photos of all time, these children here. There's just something magnificent about that family grouping, and also a little bit, to me, a little bit tragic. I did a whole storytelling canvas. Hang on, it's just the other side of the room. Here we go. A whole storytelling canvas. So this is on just a cheap craft canvas. And yes, they were definitely at the centre of my own personal family history of escape and concentration camps and loss of family, and yeah, when your number's up, your number's up. So lots of crackle and stuff like that. We should do some of this. This is embossing folders and crackle, and that's a glorious thing to do. Maybe we'll do some of that for this. Probably in the next episode though. Let's see. So I love this family grouping. I think these children are amazing. I'm wondering about some of this tape. So I'm just trying to do a bit of starting point stuff. Wondering about a little bit of that kind of thing going on behind them. Maybe it's better. That could be good, couldn't it? Let's have a go at that. Let's put some, well, I'll tell you what, if we start with some Mattints, that'll be really subtle. So the Mattint is the PaperArtsy tinted glaze, completely transparent. You can build up the layers of colour, but it'll just give me a chance to see without going too full on to start with. And then if I decide I like it, yeah, I like it. That's a piece of natural sponge. Oh no, it's not natural sponge, it's fake sponge. That's why it's dying on me. So this is the River Deep Mattint. This is Ash, which is a beautiful, it's sort of a warm grey. So it's very similar to Pumice stone, which as regulars will know is one of my favourite distress colours. So as soon as you put a second layer of Mattint on, you can see it builds colour. And the joy about these is they are acrylic, so they are permanent once they're down. So nothing's going to shift if I then choose to put other things over the top. I'm going to have to chuck this sponge, because if it's doing this, it's not much good to me as a working tool. So I might just have a look at that. If it's imperfect underneath, I'm kind of fine with that. That's all good. Great, that's a nice first layer for me to be able to look at the effect. Yes, I like that. I could create the rest of the circle. Yeah, maybe we will. Maybe we'll create a whole wheel. This stencil is, after all, called Wheel, not colour palette. I use it as a colour palette more often than not. And then I think what I'm going to do is layer some other colours over this. In fact, let's start straight away with some distress inks. So I'm going to go Faded Jeans around this top bit, and a little bit of Faded Jeans into the next hole. Let's take ourselves Stormy Sky around into here. There's a little bit of, I think, Broken China probably on that sponge, and then maybe some Pumice stone in the final little gap. There's definitely frayed burlap on that. Ooh, in fact, what might be nice is to do a little bit of oxidiness, and then we'll get something nice and chalky. So that's giving me a lovely sweep of colour. So I'm going to come back over this side and layer some pumice stone over the top of this one. So we're now going to get blended colours, but over the top of the Mattint colours we already had. So I'm now layering what you would call in watercolouring glazing and creating different colours as I go. So now I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to go some Stormy Sky. That's there. So building layers of colour, and then finally a little bit of Faded Jeans up at this top end. see what I've got. Grand. So I think I am going to go in. What are you? Your Faded Jeans, your Stormy Sky, your Pumice Stone. I think I'm going to go in with a little bit of Pumice Stone Oxide now. So the grey box is that. And although I'm perfectly happy to do multiple blue distress inks on one sponge, I do prefer to stick to a separate sponge if I'm heading into oxides, because the oxides are going to impact if I then dip them onto distress inks. So I'm not lining this up very well, which means I'm getting sort of gaps and holes and covering things up. This is going to give me the lovely chalky oxide opacity. And I think I want to put a bit of frayed burlap in as well, because frayed burlap, particularly when you start sprinkling it with water to get that oxide effect, is a real treat of a colour. That's rather nice. Might layer in a bit of a blue. What have we got? Stormy Sky. Faded Jeans. Let's have a bit of Faded Jeans oxide and just see what that gets us. And a little bit. Ooh, this is starting to do exciting things to my brain. A little bit through here, just fading into those areas. That's nice. I'm going to add a little bit more detail this side. Let's give myself. Oh, that's interesting. So where that was pressing down, that's picked up all that colour. So let's add some back in. That's the frayed burlap still left on that sponge. And then I'm going to come in with the blue somewhere here, just with a soft edging. La la la. This is just playing. I don't have a, I really don't have a plan here. This is just blues and browns and colours that make me happy. Mixing and playing and just creating a bit of background detail interest. And part of me is thinking, so there is a mini version of this. So I could do a mini version somewhere over here, but I think I quite like the balancing act of the maxi. With some frayed burlap to start with, and then put some of these blues in. So that's a nice misty one up there, just gentle and soft. That's quite fun. Since there's a little bit of ink and oxide on this, I might just go in and use it. Just use up that ink to create a little bit of messiness, a bit of splotchiness. Still bits of sponge hanging around everywhere. And now the magic of this is going to be to give this a little spritz of water, a few droplets, to let the oxidization really happen. Those distress oxides, when you add water, that's when the chalky magic really starts to take place. So I'm going to let that sit on there for a moment, let it move around, and then I'll lift up. So this, the good old spritz and flick. There's a whole video about spritzing and flicking. If you're interested in going back to have a look at that, I will link that as well. I quite like these little moments of wheel that have put in an appearance here. Right, so let me hold this up so you can see that that top layer is moving, but underneath I'm still going to have the Mattint, because that will stay put. Whereas this side where I didn't have Mattint, that's going to go back to the gessoed page. So we're going to get a really lovely variation. Love how that's softening things up there. I might do a little bit of gentle picking up so that we get some of those splotches. Oh, look at that, it's magic, isn't it? Water reactive inks. Just endless fun to play. So the splotches are really visible on this side because that's going back to the paper. Here it's going back to that soft blue-grey of the Mattint colours. So you're getting a much subtler splotch, and you might decide you like one of those effects better, or you might decide you like the other, and then you're free to play. That's rather enjoyable. And the other thing I'm thinking is I'm going to take some of this Distress Oxide, take a little spatter brush, add a bit of water to that. See, I'm now using the craft mat as a palette, and I'm going to add some splatters of that oxide. Might mix in a bit of the frayed burlap so it's a bit stronger. And as I say, as an oxide, the frayed burlap does really, really interesting things when it starts to oxidize. So that's just going to give us a little bit of connectivity across the page. joining those two elements together. Where I don't want it completely that strong, just knock it back while it's still wet. And particularly given that we're over that gessoed surface, that gives you playtime. The product doesn't sink straight in. It just gives you a chance to get a bit interesting. Look at the layers and the texture that's happening in there. It's a joy. Don't want to waste this. So there's a little bit of leftover card at the end of here. I'm just going to grab a bit of that. Just chop that piece off and use it to pick up my leftover ink, because otherwise what a waste. That's going to be fun to play with, to cut elements out of. Might do some silhouette birds, might do some little circle hole punching as we were doing the other day with paper scraps. So this is all rather pleasing. I can even use that to print some of those splotches down onto the paper. Look at that. That's a double not waste. That's a mop up and then a pick up and then a mop up and then a print down. Good. Those are some good first steps, I think. So let's come back to our little family. So this is why I didn't need this to be particularly dramatic, because actually they're covering a lot of it up. I think I'm still quite fond of that as an element. Don't want to cover up that amazing little boy there. Let's stick to having some of those. And what I'm sort of inclined to do is just do a bit of positioning. And then what I like to do very often with an art journal page is leave it for a while. Come back another day and look at it with fresh eyes, because that can be a really helpful tool to just let things percolate, marinade, shift and change. I do want to have a look at some of this tape in place. So this is just decorator's masking tape that got leftover stenciling on it when I was playing, and I think I'm going to quite enjoy having that somewhere like that, adding a bit of patterning and detail. So I'm not sticking it down hard at the moment. I'm just taking the chance to have a look at it. If I go there, for instance, with that layered over the top, that's quite nice. That's starting to make more sense to me as a game. Good. That's nice. Quite like a little bit more spat right there. So although splatter is random, sometimes you want splatter in very particular places, just to create a little bit more detail around those circles. That's nice. Ooh, and I know what else I want. I want to do a little bit of paint lid stamping, because I do enjoy that. Might do that with, what should I do that with? Maybe a soft white. Where's my Cloud 9? This is PaperArtsy Cloud 9 Fresco Finish Chalk Acrylic. On it goes. And then what I generally do is flatten that out a little bit with a brush, and then take different sized lids. So this is the lid of a distress stain, good old distress stain. Now comes as a spray, but used to come in these little bottles, and I've been hoarding mine because I love them dearly. So just a few little bubbles of hope, bubbles of happiness, bubbles of joy, bubbles of possibility. Bubbles, bubbles. I might put one onto the, yeah, see, I like that. And maybe down here. Yeah, that's good too. Because what that does is it's just tying in these elements that are slightly random at the moment, but it's saying, yes, you're all part of the same game. And then I think I want maybe a slightly larger lid. What have we got? Oh, yes, look, the Distress Glaze lid is a lovely size for some slightly larger bubbles. Let's have one here. So I'm sort of looking and seeing where the spaces are, seeing where I want a bit more detail, seeing where I want something just creating, it's almost subliminal. Obviously, if I did this in a dark colour, you get a lot more presence from these. But I think there's something rather nice about the eye sort of only half noticing them. It's all detail, it's all building possibility. And because I've got this white paint on the mat, you know what I'm going to do with it. A little bit of water, a little bit of spatter, and I'm going to go across the photo partly, but I always try to avoid the faces. Because the photo is glossy, if you do get some on the face, as long as you wipe it off while it's wet, you should be fine to clear it away again. But I just rather like that. Again, bits of subliminal texture that the eye barely consciously registers, but there is something going on. There we go. That's all making me happy so far. Let's see. I'm wondering about a balancing act with a smaller photo. I've also got these Photobooth photos here, and I'm wondering whether, I'm not going to decide which one right now. I'm just going to take a look at a photo up in this top corner just to see how I feel about it. So let's snip you off. Because in terms of a balancing act, if this is the major feature and this is a secondary kind of positioning, maybe I want not to draw the eye up there at all, or maybe I want the eye to go and tell a story. Yeah, I think it's not going to be him, partly because he's got olive green on his jumper, quite apart from anything else, but he doesn't fit on this page. So one of the things to do will be to have a look through here and find out who it is. There'll be a moment as I flick through where somebody has a relationship with them. Somebody just says, it's me. She's close, but again, I'm not sure about that rouge on the cheeks. She's rather beautiful. She could be related to them, couldn't she? Oh, look. She's a possibility. That one I'm going to pull out as a possible. And I might go back and pull out this young woman as well. Let's do that. And then let's flick through a few more. Just see if anybody says hello. He's rather good. He's rather good. The one that got away, I don't know. Oh, she's one of my all-time favourites, but she doesn't quite belong on this page. She's altogether too cheerful. And we're clearly in a blue-grey world here at the moment. Couple more. Let's just see. Let's get back round to the beginning. Another of my all-time favourites. I mean, just the joy of that expression. Oh, she's a bit yellow. So the sepia of this is a very full-on yellowy sepia. Yeah, she's a bit too coy. I think we're back round now, aren't we? Is he? No, not really. Yeah, now we're definitely back round. Good. So we've got some options there. These I'll tuck away again. Let's take a look at a couple of these. I really don't think it's him. So let's have a look at you. Quite good. Let's have a look at you. Quite good. Yeah, it's more modern. She looks sort of 1930s to me, whereas they're 1910-ish, I would say. Quite like him. I may have to continue searching. So that's a choice to be made. Possibilities. Do leave comments down below if you've got a strong preference. Maybe you can convince me with a story about which of these it is. But in terms of background layers, I think I'm sort of maybe done for today. I've got some rather nice linen ribbon here that I'm just thinking might be a lovely textural element. Let's cut a bit of that and let it be nice and thready. Just thinking that might make me happy. Yes, it does. And a little bit more up in that corner. So when I'm adding an element down here, I'm adding a kind of smaller, messier version of it up over here, just to keep things balanced. I love that thread just trailing across the page. That's wonderful. Enjoying that quite a lot. But I think in terms of where my brain is at, that is almost enough for me today. But one thing I could do is prepare, I'm thinking of using some of this ephemera from one of my recent releases. So these are all amazing vintage advertisements from sort of 1902, 1903 for typewriters, cameras, pens, art prints. So it's all words and pictures. Guess why I chose the adverts that are to do with words and pictures? And I think I'm going to add some of those in to this mix. I could even, oh look, I could stamp them. Let's have a look at some on there and just see if that's something that makes us excited. Let's have a look at this one. Stamp pad. This piece is a little bit bluey green. Have I got a big enough one to... Oh, well, let's go for it for now. Actually, it coordinates rather well with that. Pull you down out of the way. Running out of workspace. What colour to stamp in? I think potting soil or coffee might be quite good because that's going to tone in with these sepia colours that we've got going on here. So this is some potting soil. And let's stamp in this corner because that will get us a nice variation of colour. No idea what paper this is on, so I don't know what kind of quality stamping I'm going to get. That's pretty good. This is very fine, and if you stamp on specialty stamping paper or on the PaperArtsy smoothie paper, the level of detail on this stamp is just gorgeous. But that's really pretty good for what feels like a watercolour textured paper to me. So it's going to be something along those sorts of lines with some ephemera and things, I think. But for now, I sort of want to stop. I want to let things percolate, and the chances are I'll come back and look at it and think, oh yes, I understand where this is going and I understand more about who these people are. But for now, I think that might be enough for one day. Thank you for your company. I will zoom in so you get a close-up look at some of those splotches. I might remove this photo so that you can see what's going on under there with that circle that we created today. But those background stages of a page are one thing for me. And then the journey forward is a sort of separate chapter, if you like. So leaving a bit of time between those two moments. I'm actually rather liking that tumble of all three photos now that I'm looking at it. We'll see. Thank you so much for your company. If you've enjoyed today, do leave me a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. And obviously, it's always a joy to interact with you below the line. So comments and questions, check out the videos that I'll link, and I'll put down the ingredients we've used so far in this ledger page. Happy crafting all.